The scorching California sun beats down as a black man, once a proud firefighter, now works as a truck driver, navigating through the remote stretches of highway. His name is Marcus, and though his truck is loaded with supplies for a distant town, his mind drifts toward the memories of his former life. Days spent rushing toward danger, saving lives. Those days feel long gone now, replaced by the hum of the road and the ache of unspoken regret. As Marcus makes his delivery, a flash of news on the radio pulls him back to reality. A wildfire is tearing through the hills, and it's growing uncontrollable. The urgency in the announcer's voice mirrors the tension that suddenly fills the air around him. The flames are creeping closer, spreading faster than anyone anticipated. The narrow road he's traveling on becomes crowded with fire trucks rushing past, their sirens adding to the panic that grips the region. He slows down as thick smoke starts to blanket the sky. The heat is suffocating, pressing down on him like an iron fist. With his truck now halted, Marcus feels the fire's fiery breath edging closer. His instincts kick in, memories of his days as a firefighter flooding back. But then, a faint sound cuts through the roar of the flames. The frantic cries of a woman. Turning sharply, Marcus sees her. Alone in the midst of the chaos, her car is trapped by fallen trees, and she's desperately trying to clear the debris, her pregnant belly causing her every movement to slow. Panic has a firm grip on her face, and she's on the verge of collapsing. Without thinking, Marcus abandons his truck and runs toward her, the smoke thickening with every step. The inferno's roar drowns out everything else. The crackling of burning trees and the crack of falling branches reverberate in Marcus's ears as he closes the distance between himself and the woman. The air is thick with smoke, a searing heat clawing at his skin, and the flames dance in his peripheral vision like angry, hungry beasts. His breath comes in ragged gasps, but it's the sight of the woman that pushes him forward. Struggling, her face streaked with soot and tears, her hands clutch her swollen belly, pressing against it with a frantic desperation, as if trying to calm the child within. Her clothes are singed, her hair matted to her forehead with sweat, and she looks on the verge of collapse. The heat is unbearable, the flames licking the sky above them, the very ground beneath their feet beginning to burn. Marcus can see the panic in her eyes as she fights against the rising tide of fear and exhaustion. She's alone, isolated in the chaos, and time is slipping away. Every second feels like a lifetime. The flames are closing in fast. The smoke is so thick it's difficult to see, the world around them warping in the haze. Marcus knows he has to act. Now. There is no room for hesitation. Without a second thought, he drops to his knees beside her, his arms wrapping around her like a shield, lifting her as though she were a child. She gasps in pain and surprise, but Marcus holds her tightly, cradling her against his chest. The weight of the world seems to fall onto him in that moment. He feels the sweat pouring down his back, the heat pressing against them both, the air thick and choking. Yet, in the midst of it all, his focus remains absolute. The sky above them is no longer blue. Instead, it's a blood-red canvas painted by the angry inferno. The fire roars like a living, breathing entity, consuming everything in its path. The crack of breaking trees echoes ominously, and ash falls around them like snowflakes. The ground is uneven, broken, and treacherous, but Marcus doesn't flinch. His firefighter instincts kick in, guiding his every move. As they weave through the smoke and flames, the path ahead is a blur of orange and red. The heat makes it feel like they're walking through a furnace, the air too thick to breathe properly. But Marcus doesn't stop. He's determined. He knows that his training is the only thing standing between them and certain death. His legs burn, his muscles scream in protest, but he forces himself onward. Then, just as they approach a small break in the trees, a glimmer of hope. The woman gasps. It's a sharp, desperate sound, one that cuts through the cacophony of the fire. I'm having contractions, she stammers, her face contorted in pain, the fear in her eyes growing. The words hit Marcus like a thunderclap, the world around him seeming to freeze in that instant. She's in labor. The realization slams into him. He's not just saving her from the fire, he's going to have to deliver her child. His heart skips a beat, panic threatens to rise, but Marcus tampers it down with a single breath. He's faced worse before. He's walked into the heat of a blaze to save lives, and this moment is no different. His mind shifts into overdrive. Every step has to count. There's no room for hesitation now. He adjusts his grip on her, lifting her a little higher, trying to steady her trembling body as they move toward the temporary shelter. His firefighter instincts tell him they're not out of danger yet. Every movement must be calculated. He's breathing heavily, the smoke searing his lungs, but he keeps his focus on her. "Just breathe with me," he says, his voice firm but gentle. "In and out. Stay with me. Focus on me." Her breaths are shallow, desperate. He can see the tension building in her face, her body starting to give way under the weight of both the flames and the labor. But Marcus refuses to let her break. He keeps her calm with soothing words, though inside, his heart is pounding like a war drum. There's no time to wait for help. The fire continues to consume everything around them, and they are alone in the chaos. They find a small, temporary shelter behind a rock outcrop, barely enough protection from the firestorm closing in on them. The air is thick with smoke, but it's slightly cooler here, just enough for Marcus to catch his breath and for the woman to stabilize for a moment. He kneels beside her, gently placing her down on the ground as she winces in pain. Her hands are shaking as they clutch her belly, and sweat pours down her face, but she's still fighting. "I need you to focus," Marcus urges, kneeling beside her, taking her hand. "We're going to make it. I promise you, we're going to make it." Her eyes search his, filled with terror and desperation, but something shifts in her gaze as she holds his hand tightly. It's a moment of connection, a fleeting moment of trust amidst the chaos. Marcus's heart beats in time with hers, a shared rhythm that steadies them both. He knows there's no going back. This is his moment to be the hero again, to be the man he used to be, the firefighter, the protector. With steady hands, he helps her through the pain, guiding her breath, trying to calm her enough for the birth. Each contraction is another hurdle to overcome, but he keeps his focus, keeps his voice calm and reassuring. Every time the ground shakes with the roar of the fire, he whispers, "You're doing great. We're almost there." The tension in the air is palpable. Every moment is a gamble. Will they make it out of the firestorm alive? Will the baby survive the hellish conditions? And if they do, what kind of world will they return to? Will it be a world of destruction? Or will they find something beautiful waiting for them on the other side of this nightmare? Marcus doesn't have the answers. All he can do is keep moving forward, one step at a time. After what feels like an eternity, they finally reach a small makeshift shelter where emergency responders rush to her side. The woman, now weak and breathing heavily, is taken into care, and Marcus watches as she's whisked away. His heart races, not from the fire, but from the shock of what he's just done. He looks around, feeling the weight of everything that has just unfolded, when he is approached by a nurse. "What's your relationship to her?" the nurse asks, her voice soft, almost cautious. "Anxious?" "Just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time," Marcus replies, his voice gruff. But then, the nurse drops a bombshell. The woman is the fiancée of Marcus's estranged brother, Elijah. The revelation sends shockwaves through him. He hasn't spoken to Elijah in years, not since a bitter argument over something that now feels trivial in the face of all that's happened. His brother's betrayal, or so Marcus thought, had created a chasm between them, one that neither could bridge. The woman, still catching her breath, reveals that she'd been trying to reach Marcus for months. She knew the strain between them, but she had hoped, prayed, for a chance to repair the broken family. Her words are a knife to Marcus's heart, as she confesses that Elijah had been struggling with his own demons, unaware of how much pain his silence had caused Marcus. As the woman slowly recovers, her breathing steadies, and the trauma of the wildfire begins to ease its grip on her body. But it's the words she speaks next that hold Marcus captive. Her voice is soft, barely audible over the persistent hum of activity around them, but each word cuts through the air with the weight of years of history between them. "You're the only family he has left," she whispers, her eyes filled with both pain and hope. "Please, come back, make it right. For him, for the baby." The silence that follows her plea feels suffocating. Marcus stands motionless, his eyes fixed on the woman in front of him, her swollen belly and the fragile exhaustion etched across her face. His mind is in a turmoil, a whirlpool of memories and emotions that threaten to overwhelm him. The past feels like a wall that stretches so high it's impossible to see beyond it. How can he forgive the man who walked away when he needed him most? How can he forget the betrayal that has poisoned his soul for years? Marcus clenches his fists, the familiar ache of past wounds resurfacing with every thought. His brother, Elijah, once his best friend, his confidant, had abandoned him during the hardest time of his life. When Marcus was struggling, lost in the aftermath of the war, when the weight of everything had become too much to bear, Elijah turned his back on him. The bitterness had consumed him since then, and the walls he built between himself and his brother had become unbreachable, fortified by years of pain and resentment. End footnote. Yet, as he looks at the woman, her eyes reflecting both fear and hope, a flicker of something unexpected stirs within him. Her voice, so soft, yet so full of conviction, echoes in his mind. For him, for the baby. The walls he had constructed, brick by brick, begin to feel less like protection and more like a prison. The fire had taken so much, homes, lives, safety, but as he stands there, his thoughts shifting like sand beneath his feet, he realizes something important. The flames may have ravaged the land, but they had also burned away some of the stubbornness, some of the hurt, leaving space for something else to take root, something fragile yet powerful, hope. Marcus's chest tightens as he looks down at her, the mother of his brother's child, vulnerable and fighting for both her life and that of the child she carries. She may be exhausted, her body battered by the fire, but in her plea there's a strength, a quiet power that reaches into the deepest part of him, the thought of family, the ties that should bind, the blood that runs thick, begins to tug at him, unwilling to be ignored any longer. What if there is a way to heal? What if he could put the past behind him and find a way to move forward? In a moment of clarity, Marcus makes a decision that surprises even him. He will reach out. For the first time in years, he will take a step toward the brother he had cut off so completely. The walls he'd built begin to crumble, and with that crumbling, there's a painful but hopeful release. The days that follow are a blur, but Marcus's determination is unwavering. The wildfire has caused destruction, yes, but it has also forced him to face the deep scars he has carried with him. There's no going back to what was, but perhaps there is a way forward. Then the day arrives. The baby is born, a healthy, squirming infant, full of life and innocence. Marcus stands by the door of the hospital room, his heart pounding in his chest. He feels a swirl of emotions, none of which are easy to process. His brother Elijah is there, his face a mask of exhaustion and relief. The air between them is thick, heavy with years of unspoken words and unresolved tension. The moment feels suspended in time, the gravity of the situation pressing down on both of them. Marcus stands at the threshold, unsure whether to step inside, unsure whether to face the man who had once been his everything. Elijah looks up, his eyes locking with Marcus's. For a moment, neither says a word, but the silence between them speaks volumes. Marcus. Then, in a slow, deliberate movement, Marcus walks into the room. The air is thick with emotion, but something has shifted. The anger that once dominated their relationship is no longer all-consuming. There is something else now, a tentative understanding, a recognition that the years apart, have left both of them broken in different ways. Marcus looks down at the tiny newborn in Elijah's arms, and for the first time in years, he doesn't feel anger. Instead, he feels the unfamiliar sting of something else. The yearning for connection, the longing for family. Elijah, still uncertain, holds the baby out to Marcus. With a trembling hand, Marcus takes the infant into his arms. The baby's tiny fingers curl around his own, and in that simple, profound gesture, Marcus feels something inside him begin to heal. The weight of the past doesn't vanish in an instant, but in that moment, he allows himself to feel something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: love, connection, and the possibility of forgiveness. As he holds the newborn, Marcus feels the warmth of family envelop him. It's a warmth that had been missing for so long, and it's not defined by the bitterness of the past, but by the potential of the future. He looks at Elijah, and in that look, they both understand there is no undoing the past, but perhaps, just perhaps, there is a chance to build something better moving forward. The fire had ravaged the land, but in its wake, it had sparked something far more powerful: the possibility of redemption, the opportunity for healing, and the chance to rebuild what had once been broken. As the story comes to a close, Marcus realizes that life isn't just about surviving the flames. It's about the connections we choose to make, the people we choose to forgive, and the futures we decide to build together. He stands with his brother, holding the baby in his arms, and for the first time in years, he allows himself to hope. The past doesn't have to define them. They can choose to write a new story, a story of family, forgiveness, and a future they can rebuild together. Should he let go of the past and embrace the possibility of a future that includes reconciliation? The fire has forced him to face that question head-on, and as the days unfold, Marcus understands that the answer lies not in holding on to old hurts, but in opening his heart to what could be: a chance for healing, for forgiveness, and for the family they have left. As he holds the newborn, Marcus feels the warmth of family envelop him. It's a warmth that had been missing for so long. And it's not defined by the bitterness of the past, but by the potential of the future. He looks at Elijah, and in that look, they both understand. There is no undoing the past, but perhaps, just perhaps, there is a chance to build something better moving forward. Externalities, changes, values, and thoughts and ideas change all the time. The fire had ravaged the land, but in its wake, it had sparked something far more powerful: the possibility of redemption, the opportunity for healing, and the chance to rebuild what had once been broken. As the story comes to a close, Marcus realizes that life isn't just about surviving the flames. It's about the connections we choose to make, the people we choose to forgive, and the futures we decide to build together. He stands with his brother, holding the baby in his arms, and for the first time in years, he allows himself to hope. The past doesn't have to define them. They can choose to write a new story, a story of family, forgiveness, and a future they can rebuild together. Should he let go of the past and embrace the possibility of a future that includes reconciliation? The fire has forced him to face that question head-on, and as the days unfold, Marcus understands that the answer lies not in holding on to old hurts, but in opening his heart to what could be: a chance for healing, for forgiveness, and for the family they have left.